This is the teacher video for lesson 6. We're kind of doing phylum Mollusca a little backwards. Usually we talk through the 7 characteristics of survival and then do the classes. But with Mollusca, I decided to do it flipped because there is such a diversity of mollusks, and when we talk about how they fulfill their 7 survival characteristic, there are different ways depending on which class the mollusk belongs in. So I wanted to get you familiar with the mollusk classes before we talked about the 7 survival characteristics. So first of all, what is a mollusk? Molluscus in Latin means soft, and mollusks are soft-bodied animals that usually have an internal or an external shell. That's our definition of a mollusk. Now, all mollusks have true coeloms and complex organ systems. And remember, a coelom is a body cavity with organs lined in mesoderm. So they do have organs lined in mesoderm, they do have a body cavity, and they have complex organ systems. And we'll definitely talk about the kinds of organ systems they have in the next lesson when we talk about the 7 survival characteristics. Most mollusks have 4 parts to their body plan, and I want to talk through those 4. The first is a foot. The foot is a thick and muscular body part. It may be used for crawling or burrowing, or it may be divided into tentacles. It depends on the mollusk. But this is a general picture of a mollusk, a general mollusk, and the foot is right here sticking out. So pay attention to this foot here because it is going to differ among the different mollusks. But all mollusks have a foot. The second body part or body plan that mollusks have is the mantle. The mantle covers the body like a cloak and secretes the shell. So here in this drawing, the mantle is represented by this black line. The mantle identification is pointing to it, and it is secreting the shell, which is on the outside here of this mollusk. It is kind of thin in some mollusks. You can peel it away from the shell. In other mollusks, it's very thick, and we'll talk about that when we get to cephalopods. The third part of the body plan that mollusks have is the shell. It offers protection for some mollusks. It is internal in others, or it is completely lost in other mollusks. So the shell is kind of up in the air. Sometimes mollusks have it, sometimes it's inside their bodies, and sometimes they don't have it at all. But in general, mollusks have some sort of shell. And then the fourth part of the body plan that all mollusks have is a visceral mass. And that's a group of internal organs. So here in red, all of these organs are grouped together in a mass. This is the visceral mass, the organ mass, all grouped together there. All right, so let's talk about our first mollusk class Gastropoda. Gastropoda literally means stomach foot. Gastro is stomach and poda is foot. And we'll look at the picture of the gastropod there and see why it's called the stomach foot. It's literally because the stomach rests on top of the foot. These are shellless or single-shelled mollusks that move by using a muscular foot. So these are single-shelled. You need to pay attention to that. Or they are shellless, and they move using a muscular foot. So that foot is muscular in class Gastropoda. The common names are, I'll refer to them as gastropods all the time. That's somewhat a common name. But other than that, there's snails and slugs. Something you may be a little less familiar with are nautilus. And then seashells come from members of Gastropoda, and we'll look at a picture. So here's the gastropod body plan. And the question on your notes is, does it have all 4 parts of the body plan? Now, all 4 parts. The first is the foot. Yes, all gastropods have a foot. And in gastropods, it's muscular and it helps them move. Does the gastropod have a mantle? Yes, it does. even mollusks that don't have, or even gastropods that don't have a shell have a mantle. So yes, do all gastropods have a shell? The answer is no. Slugs do not have a shell, and they don't have a remnant of a shell. So they have lost their shell through their evolutionary history. And then visceral mass. Yes, all gastropods have a visceral mass. And you can see here that the stomach rests on top of the foot. And that's why they're called gastropods. So to answer the question in the notes, do all gastropods have all 4 parts of the body plan? The answer is no. Or, well, the answer is it depends on the animal. Because snails and nautiluses and some of those seashells we'll see in a minute have all 4 parts, but slugs do not. And so it depends on the gastropod. It depends on the animal. So here's our first gastropod, a common land snail. So here's the muscular foot, and here's the single shell. These are rather large African snails. They're very large, you can see, about as big as a hand. And here's that muscular foot. The shell and the mantle would be underneath the shell here. This is a banana slug, no shell. Here is the muscular foot with the mantle on top. This is a nautilus. It is an ocean gastropod, lives in the deep sea and comes up at night to hunt. In this gastropod, here is the single shell, and the foot in this case is divided into these tentacle-like things. Now these are seashells, so if you go to a beach and collect seashells, you're collecting the leftover body parts of a deceased gastropod. So all of these are single-shelled. All of them once had a mollusk inside, and this is what's left over. So here's a marine gastropod that's still living. Here is the muscular foot, and here is the shell on top. This is another living gastropod. Here is the foot, and then here is the shell. All right, our next class is class Bivalvia. Bivalvia literally means 2 shells. Bi means 2 and valvia means shell. So the definition of a bivalve is 2 shelled mollusks that are held together by 1 or 2 powerful muscles. And the common name for bivalves, there are clams, scallops, oysters, cockles. It could really go on and on. There are a lot of common names for bivalves. Just as a note, I'll call this group bivalves because that's groups them all together. But clams, scallops, oysters, and cockles are just some examples. So here's the bivalve body plan. Let's go through and see if they have all 4. First, bivalves have a foot. And in some bivalves, this is used to dig. In some bivalves, it's used to kind of crawl along. So it depends on the bivalve. Here's a mantle. All bivalves have a mantle. And then shell. All bivalves have a shell. In fact, they have 2 of them. That's why they're called bivalves. And then here's the visceral mass. So do all bivalves have the 4 parts of the body plan? The answer is yes. So now let's look through some examples. Here's a bivalve. We can only see the 1 valve or the 1 shell here. Here's some scallops. You can see there's differing in size and color, all sorts of scallops. Here's a clam that's underwater. You can see here the 2 shells. Here's one side, and then here's the other with the mantle underneath. Here is a bivalve with the foot sticking out here, this muscular foot. Here's another bivalve. This shows a really good picture of the 2 shells. So 1, 2, the muscular foot and the mantle. Our next and final mollusk class is class Cephalopoda. Cephalopoda literally means head, foot. Cephalo means head and poda means foot, and we'll see why that is when we get to the body plan. The definition of cephalopods are soft-bodied mollusks in which the head is attached to a single foot. The foot is divided into tentacle and arms. So the reason it's called head-foots is because the head is attached to a single foot. The common name for cephalopods are octopus, squid, and cuttlefish. And again, I'll refer to them often as cephalopods. So here's the body plan. Let's first talk why it's called cephalopod. So the brain is right here with the foot right here. So in gastropods, the stomach and the organs are resting on the foot. But in this case, the head is closer to the foot, so that's why it's called head foot. So let's look for the 4 parts of the body plan. First is the foot. Here it is down here, and in this case, it's divided into tentacles and arms. That's true of all cephalopods, so they do have a foot. The next one is mantle, and the mantle is all of this outside part. So if you've ever eaten squid or octopus, you will have eaten mantle, the mantle of a cephalopod. You will also have eaten the foot, but the mantle is the thick, you can't call it skin because it's not skin, it doesn't function like us, but if you looked at an octopus or squid, you would think that it was the skin because it's the outside part of what you see. The shell rudiment in some octopi or octopuses, they have a teeny little shell inside. Some don't have that remnant at all. In squids, we call it the pen or the shell remnant. And then the visceral mass, here's the visceral mass, all these organs all grouped together. So to answer the question in the notes, do all cephalopods have the 4 parts of the body plan? It depends on the animal. And in particular, it's the shell rudiment or the shell remnant that is or isn't present in cephalopods. It depends on the species. Okay, so here's probably the most famous cephalopod, an octopus. So everything here we're seeing is mantle, except for down here, then this is the foot. So mantle that we're seeing, here's the head attached to the foot, and then the visceral mass is inside here. This is a giant squid, so everything you see here is mantle, with the head right here attached to the foot, which is divided into arms and tentacles, and then the visceral mass is all here, underneath here. Here's a smaller squid, and you'll get to do your first virtual dissection on a virtual squid. So here's the head attached to the foot, which is divided into tentacles. The visceral mass is up here, and all of this that you can see is mantle. And then here's a cuttlefish. You may not be familiar with cuttlefish, but they're an ocean animal, an ocean mollusk. So here's the foot that's divided into tentacles. Here's the head. Cephalopods often have very advanced eyes, and you can see that here in the cuttlefish. And then the visceral mass is under here, and this is all mantle. So to end, I wanted to reference Finding Nemo when Dory and Martin go to find Nemo, and they run into this large group of fish, and this fish kind of does, the fish kind of do charades, and they do this octopus, and Dory says clam, and they say close enough. You might think that doesn't make any sense, but now it does, because clam and octopus are both mollusks, and so they're both in the phylum Mollusca, so it's close enough. Yes, they are in different classes, but now we know that octopus and clams are related. They're both mollusks. They're both soft-bodied creatures that have some sort of shell. The octopus has a remnant and the clam has 2 shells, but they are related, and so it really is close enough. So that's phylum Mollusca classes, and now you can move on with the rest of your lesson.